This happened to me. For weeks, this guy would get these mysterious phone calls at 3:13 a.m. every morning from a disconnected number. At first, he thought it was just a prank. But when the voice on the other end began whispering secrets, things got really scary. To make things even weirder, that same voice would call him again 2 days later and say, "You shouldn't have called." That's when our hero decides to do some digging and uncover the truth behind the creepy calls. What he found out will shock you. Stay tuned for more creepy stories like this one. And now, back to the story. The phone rang loudly in the silent room, shattering the peaceful quiet of the night. John woke up with a jolt, his heart pounding in his chest. As he looked towards the nightstand, he saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. It was 3:13 a.m. He wasn't expecting any calls at this hour, so he hesitated before picking up the phone. The caller ID showed a local number he didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of him, and he answered the call. "Hello," he said cautiously. All he heard on the other end was silence. John was about to hang up when he heard a faint whisper. "Stop answering." The voice was raspy and seemed to be coming from a great distance. Startled by what he heard, John quickly hung up the phone and tried to go back to sleep. But those few words echoed in his mind, making it hard for him to concentrate. He tossed and turned in bed, trying to analyze the mysterious call. Who was on the other end, and why were they calling him at such a late hour? Was it a prank, or something more sinister? John couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. The next morning, he decided to call the number back, but it was disconnected. This only added to his confusion and made him more determined to find out the truth. Days turned into weeks, and the calls persisted. Every night at exactly 3:13 a.m., John would receive a call from the same disconnected number. At first, the voice on the other end would be quiet, almost inaudible. But as time went on, it became louder, more insistent. Sometimes he would hear the sound of heavy breathing on the other end, as if the person was right next to him, watching him. John started to feel uneasy, like he was being stalked by an unseen presence. He tried blocking the number, but the calls continued. It was as if the person on the other end was relentless, determined to get through to him no matter what. He began researching online, trying to find out who might be behind these calls, but came up empty-handed. The number wasn't listed anywhere, and there was no way to trace it back to its owner. One day, while browsing through old family albums, John came across a familiar face. It was his grandfather, whom he hadn't seen in years. A wave of nostalgia washed over him as he remembered spending summer holidays at his grandfather's secluded farmhouse. He had been so excited to visit the farm animals and play in the vast fields. But as the years passed, the visits became less frequent. John picked up the phone and dialed his grandfather's number. He hoped that maybe his grandfather could help him solve this mystery. When his grandfather picked up the phone, his raspy voice filled with kindness, John explained about the mysterious calls and asked if he knew anything about it. His grandfather listened patiently, a thoughtful silence hanging between them. Finally, his grandfather spoke. "I think I might know what this is all about," he said, his voice grave. "There was someone who lived on my farm years ago. She had a daughter. They kept to themselves, but one day they vanished without a trace. The authorities never found them, and it's been a mystery ever since." John's heart skipped a beat. Could this have something to do with the calls? Eager to learn more, he pressed his grandfather for details. His grandfather hesitated, as if unsure whether to share what he was about to say. The woman's name was Sarah, he finally said. She and her daughter moved away when they received a mysterious offer, a chance to start anew somewhere else. They left without saying goodbye. I remember feeling a sense of loss, not just because they were good people, but also because the mystery surrounding their departure cast a shadow over the community. As John listened, he couldn't shake off the feeling that this was more than just a random act of cruelty. There was something deeper, something more sinister at play. John thanked his grandfather for the information and hung up the phone. He knew he had to act fast. He needed to find out everything he could about Sarah and her daughter before it was too late. With renewed determination, he delved deeper into his research, combing through old newspaper clippings and talking to anyone who might have known Sarah. Each piece of information he uncovered brought him closer to the truth, but it also filled him with a growing sense of dread. One afternoon, while sifting through old boxes in his attic, John stumbled upon a long-forgotten diary. Its leather cover was soft and worn, the pages filled with elegant cursive writing. As he opened the diary, he felt a sudden chill run down his spine. The entry spoke of a deep love between a mother and daughter, their life on the farm, and their dreams for the future. But as John read further, he discovered a darker side to these entries. Sarah wrote about feeling isolated, about strange occurrences on the farm, and about receiving threatening letters from an unknown sender. One entry in particular stood out. Dated March the 18th, it read, "I can't take it anymore. The calls and the letters are driving me crazy. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I have to do what's best for Lily. We have to start fresh somewhere else. I hope this new place will bring us peace." Below the entry, John noticed a small sketch of a house that looked eerily familiar, with a mix of excitement and trepidation. John rushed to his grandfather's farmhouse. He needed to see if the house in the sketch matched the one on his grandfather's property. As he stood before the house, the reality of the situation hit him. This wasn't just a random occurrence. It was deeply connected to his own family's history. The diary revealed a haunting truth. Sarah and her daughter hadn't just vanished. They had been taken, their lives brutally cut short. John felt a surge of anger and determination. He was going to uncover the truth, no matter how dark it may be. In the following days, John's obsession with finding the truth grew. He spent hours poring over old documents and interviewing locals, desperate to find any clue that could lead him to Sarah and her daughter's killer. As he dug deeper, he uncovered a web of deceit and corruption that reached far into his town's history. But as he got closer to the truth, the danger became more apparent. John started receiving threatening phone calls and anonymous letters warning him to stop his investigation. He could feel the killer watching him, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Determined to protect himself, John decided to confront the killer head-on. He went to the abandoned house, the one from Sarah's diary, hoping to find evidence that could bring the killer to justice. But what he found instead was a horrifying surprise. The house was empty, or so he thought. As he explored the dilapidated rooms, he heard a noise in the attic. With a mix of fear and determination, he climbed the creaky stairs and entered the dusty attic. And that's where he saw him. A shadowy figure stood in the corner, his face hidden in the darkness. "Who are you?" John asked, his voice echoing in the silence. The figure turned, revealing a face twisted with rage. "You shouldn't have come here," the man growled, his eyes flashing with menace. Before John could react, the man lunged at him, his hands like claws reaching for his throat. John screamed in surprise as he struggled to free himself from the man's grip. The two men grappled, their bodies twisting and turning in the confined space. But the man was stronger, more experienced in the art of violence. John could feel his strength draining away. Just as he thought all hope was lost, he managed to land a punch connecting with the man's jaw. The man stumbled back, momentarily stunned. John took this chance to break free and run. He raced down the stairs, his heart pounding in his chest, the sound of the man's enraged shouts echoing behind him. As he burst through the door and ran into the night, he knew he had only seconds to get away before the man recovered. John didn't stop running until he reached his car. He fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He could hear the man's footsteps getting closer. Then, as suddenly as it started, the chase was over. The sound of crashing footsteps faded into the distance, replaced by the eerie silence of the night. John slumped against his car, his body trembling with exhaustion and fear. He had escaped, but he knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The killer was still out there, and he would stop at nothing to silence John. As the days passed, John became increasingly paranoid. He couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched, that the killer was out there waiting for him to let his guard down. He tried to go about his daily routine, but the fear of the killer's return haunted his every move. Then, one evening, as John was walking home from a grocery store, it happened. He felt a tap on his shoulder and turned to see an empty street. The groceries in his hand suddenly felt heavy, and he walked faster trying to reach the safety of his home. But then he heard it again, a tap, tap on his shoulder. This time, he could swear he heard a whisper in his ear. "It's too late, John." His blood ran cold as he turned around. But there was no one there. He broke into a run, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the killer's presence behind him, getting closer. The sound of his own breathing filled his ears as he stumbled toward his house. Just a few more steps, and he would be safe. But as he reached for the key in his pocket, a hand clamped over his mouth, stifling his scream. John struggled, but it was no use. The killer was stronger, more ruthless. John could feel his life slipping away as the killer dragged him into the darkness, and that's when he realized the truth. The killer wasn't after revenge. He was after something else, something that belonged to John. The diary, the calls. It was all part of a sinister plan to lure John into a trap. But what was the killer's ultimate goal? What did he want with John? Unfortunately, we don't know, because that's where the story ends. So, what do you think? What was the killer's motive? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more creepy stories like this one. Thanks for watching.